I'd like to introduce myself as very briefly before we go. As you know, my name is Peter Chong. My father is a Chinese immigrant from a province in China called Dongkung, Dongguan, depending on how you spell it and what letters you're reading. If it's Chinese characters, it seems to be like Dongguan. If it's English, it's Dongguan. I was there. I was fortunate to visit my father's province last year. It's a great honor to be able to do that. My mother is a native Fijian from the province of Ndau Samu, the clan of Ndakuitova. It basically means behind the Mount Tova in Ndau Samu. I'd like to introduce our sacred tree of my clan, and that is the Yasi, sandalwood. It's a very prized tree right now. There's a lot of interest because of the nice smell inside the heart of the sandalwood. Our sacred fish is the yawa, or in English it's called the milk fish. Not the best fish to eat for men if you come home drinking a lot of grog, because there's a lot of bones in that fish. Our sacred animal is the ramba, or in English it's called the goshawk. Belongs to the hawk family. Very strong, like the hawk. So it's supposed to be a very strong animal. Defends its nest very well. About 5 weeks ago, we gave a talk to the Catholic Women's League Conference together with Dr. Choeli Vitayak in Namusi, and I introduced the concept of totemism and to show our connectedness to creation and to the land. And I invited the women to share with one another their totem, and then to come and share to the big group and share and begin to introduce themselves in this manner, where you come from, or your sacred animal, tree, and fish. So I would like to ask you just for a moment to introduce yourself to the next person beside you. If you don't have this kind of concept framework in your culture, probably you can share something that is sacred to you in nature, in the sea, or up in the air somewhere. So can you just do that for very briefly? You know, in Fijian, if you, in front of people, if you happen to say their totem, you will be penalized. They will give you a summon and take you to court, and something that I'll talk about later on, and demand of you a penalty. So be very careful with Fijian people. Don't mention their totem in front of them, or do something, disrespectful, because they might give you a summon for you to pay something. My topic tonight, the broader topic that Mika has put forth, but I was given the title, Reweaving the Ecological Net, and that is what I would like to speak on tonight. Weaving, as you know, is something that is at home in our Oceania cultures. Many times it's a community effort. Weaving is about interconnectedness of the weaving, the mat, and how each strand of the voi, the pandana leaves, holds each other and contributes to the whole mat. So when one voi tears, when one strand tears, then, if you don't mend it or you don't weave it, then the mat begins to fall apart. It's a community effort. By that I mean, most of the time I know women ask other women, because there's a lot of work involved in it. Cooking the voi, sanding it, softening it. And I remember we used to get involved in this as small kids growing up with our grandmother who used to do this. And part of our job at that time is after night prayers, we would help grandmother soften the vui. We do that by bringing the vui, and our house has got posts inside, corrugated iron with posts. So we bring the vui, wrap it around the post, and then begin to do it like this to soften the, sometimes like nodding off to sleep. Small kids, bedtime, but grandmother wants us to soften the vui. And after that, then you begin to scrape it with a kai shell, you know, the mussel, freshwater mussel. And so it's a lot of small work. When it finally comes to a weaved mat like this, there's a lot of work, detailed work. It goes into the weaving of a mat. There's two themes, images that comes to me when you talk about reweaving. One is to when you weave, you you make sure you are that the pattern is steady, and that you have to continue realign, look forward, look back, that the thing is synchronizing with the rest of it. The other image that comes to my mind is when the mat gets old, and then you have to reweave it or repair the torn ones, putting in new strands of voi, which is very close to what theology is about. Theology is about weaving together experience, culture, scripture, Christian tradition, and also reason, philosophy. So the weaving together of this is what makes theology. But also in terms of the more liberation kind of theology as a second moment in reflecting on what you have done. So action always comes first, and then God acts in the world. Then theology is like a contemplative dimension. You look back and see what God is doing in creation. So a good analogy, a good image of what theology is. Added to that here in the Oceania is the development of weavers' theology. And in some years back, I think 2000, and I'm not too sure, but 2001, there was a workshop on women doing theology in Oceania on this theme, weaving. And according to Lindia Johnson, Oceania women theologians are involved in interweaving the various strands of lived experience and the Christian tradition. So that's basically what theology is: experience, culture, and how you weave that together with the Christian tradition. They employed the imagery of weaving a mat. Oceania women have sought to explain how to engage in the tasks of theological reflection by weaving together strands of personal, cultural, global experience along with the strands of the biblical and the church tradition. And that is what theology, according to David Tracy, in his book, The Analogical Imaginations, he talks about theology as a faithfulness between human experience and the church's tradition. So I want to applaud the organizers of this course for choosing such a dynamic image or analogy of what we do in theology, that of reweaving. A little bit of my context, where I am coming from here, and my interest along these lines, just to show that I'm rooted in this, have a special interest. The two priests who put together a small book on social analysis, linking faith with justice, Peter Hendriot and Joe Holland. And so they talked about in that little book how to do social analysis. But at the end of all that, he said they acknowledge the limitation of the social science language in its ability to move to praxis, to move to action, and the limitation of a scientific language to only the educated and the scientific people, and its an inability to reach down to the people and actually to the heart of people. So after talking a lot about social analysis, they said that what we need is the artistic language. And this is the language that touches the hearts of people, that moves hearts and moves people's feelings and to action. So what do they mean by artistic language? Is all that language that has to do with art, music, art as drawing, beauty, song, dance, chants, something. All these are cultures in the Oceania packed with this and are rich in these symbolic languages. And since the publication of Laudato Si, Pope Francis's encyclical, and listening to other people speak about it, I am more convinced that in the Oceania and other cultures, what we need is more than the Laudato Si. We need a language that speaks to us, that uses the artistic language of our cultures. And even Pope Francis acknowledges that, that he says, we need to turn to the indigenous people because they are more rooted in the land and nature, and their language has this ability to ground ecological issues. Also, the issues related to extractive industries, mining, globalization has been also a context that not that I deal with, but I struggle with or try to maneuver around or find a language to bring our faith into these areas. In the Catholic Women's League, we presented the Pope's letter there, and especially in the context of mining in Namosi. It's quite interesting that Namosi mining explorations has been done there for 40 years. Either they've found the gold, or there's no gold there, or they're still looking for it, or why it takes so many years to explore and to check out whether there is gold or not, sorry, copper or not copper. In my home province, just next to my mother's village, about a year ago, there was a big news of the healing water of Natanrandavi. And the contradiction down there, which I'm trying to come to terms with, is about 400 meters down the road is probably the biggest stone quarry in Fiji, which is actually taking stones from the water, turning that into what they call sealing chips to make the tar seal on the road, and having a bad impact on something that was life-giving about 400 meters up there, and other, and of course, globalization. So, Reweaving the Ecological Net has given me an opportunity to explore, especially Itoke symbolic language, to speak to these issues and to help deal with the challenges of today. And also the challenge on how to communicate to the ecological crisis in a way that moves the heart of people. So that's just a little bit of where I'm coming from this. Now I'd like to move to my the content of my talk, and I'd like to begin with a thesis statement, which really comes from Laudato Si. And this is the thesis statement that will run through this lecture. So bear this in mind, because this is the thing that we will be tossing back and forth in this lecture. So in the beginning, there existed a relationship of interconnectedness among all things in the whole of the universe. Today, we are losing our interconnectedness. Our common home, Mother Earth, is heading for an ecological crisis. Our Mother Earth is becoming a pile of filth. We have to reweave the threads of our interconnectedness. Where do we look to for resources and inspiration for interconnectedness? And this is the argument that I will go through, that will weave through this lecture, and that is we look to indigenous, native cosmology and spiritual tradition. And that's the point really that I want to make tonight. First, in the beginning, everything was interconnected. Then something happened. We lost our interconnectedness. Now we are searching for that interconnectedness. And the argument that I want to make tonight is that we have something that the world is looking for. So in the beginning, there are two traditions that we turn to when we talk about the beginning of the universe. We look to our biblical tradition and also the scientific. So very briefly, I want to speak to this. So the biblical tradition talks about the beginnings of the world in the book of Genesis. In chapter 1, we see how God made the world. And then chapter 2 really is about the fall. But both accounts of creation show the goodness of the universe and that the universe has its unique value. Each living creation, star, plant, animal, and up to human beings are charged with the goodness and meaning because, like us, all creation is made in the image of God. All living things in creation bear the trademark of God within them. And that is why at the end of each day, the text repeats the words like a refrain of a song, and God saw that everything was good. And then the second tradition is in Genesis chapter 2 and 3, which talks about the fall. Genesis 2 and 3 accounts the prophetic reflection on the drama of the human experience, namely especially the fall as part of that human experience. Here the author wants to critique the present situation and to assert that it is in contrary to the plan of God. Human beings have always been sinners, both now and long ago. But the purpose of the story is to overcome that situation and to join with God in rebuilding this paradise, to reweave that interconnectedness. So maintaining the present situation means going against the Creator's will. So this biblical story contains not so this Genesis 2 does not repeat does not have a cosmology proper, but rather a story that presents the God and the God's purpose for the universe, and the place of human beings in that universe, and how contradictory to the plan of God our world has become. Pope Francis says that the creation accounts in the book of Genesis contains profound teachings about human existence and the historical reality of that human existence. And they suggest that the human is grounded on three relationships: relationship with God, with our neighbor, and with the earth itself. So that's a biblical tradition and a very brief comment. The other source that we have about creation is from the scientific source, and the most dominant, or the leading explanation of how the universe began is through this Big Bang theory. I'd like to play a YouTube on that just to capture it. I'm not a scientific person. I don't even know how to explain this complex thing.
Very tiny. The first microsecond set in motion the primordial era. Atoms formed within a hot soup of subatomic particles. The universe cooled as it ballooned outward, growing dim and falling into what's known as the cosmic dark ages. But gravity was always at work, particles pulling on one another. And after several 100 million years, considerable clumps of matter had drawn together. These isolated pockets of gas became dense enough to heat up and ignite. So began the era of stars. In this glorious age, the universe planted the rich cosmic landscapes we see in our telescopes, where hundreds of billions of stars light up galaxies all across the universe. The arc of this great era of stars is defined by the life cycles of those stars, which vary according to their sizes. Stars shine because gravity crushes matter into their cores. The energy released pushes outward and balances the inward force of gravity. This battle between energy and gravity is still raging in stars all around the universe. But in large stars, about 10 million years after their birth, gravity gains the edge and tips the balance. When the core of such a star crosses a critical mass threshold, it collapses in on itself. The energy released causes the star to explode in a blast of light and debris that's visible across the cosmos. In the wake of this supernova, shock waves can cause nearby clouds of dust and gas to collapse and catch fire to form a generation of smaller stars like our sun. But when sun-like stars go, their end will be more of a whimper than a bang, as shown in this gallery of dying stars captured by the Hubble Space Telescope. As their cores get heavier and heavier over billions of years' time, fierce winds will begin to push on their outer layers, causing them to blossom out in spectacular displays. That's just what happened about 12,000 years ago to the star that's become the famed Helix Nebula. Today, we see the dying star's outer layers form a vast glowing ring. On the inside of the ring, spokes of more dense gas are being exposed by its winds. The star itself is now a dim, cooling remnant called a white dwarf. It's the size of the Earth, but about 3 million times more dense. This is likely what's in store for our sun. A civilization distant in time may scan the sun for planets, but they won't see Earth. Our home planet's end will have begun long before that, as rising solar luminosity gradually blasts away its atmosphere, rendering it uninhabitable. Surface water will disappear, evaporated by all that heat and stripped off by solar winds. Finally, as the sun blows off its outer layers, they will envelop the Earth. Friction with those gases will cause this once blue world to gradually spiral home, melting into its mother sun. This battle between energy and gravity repeats in every corner of a galaxy like ours, with gravity drawing gas clouds into stars. The stars will burn themselves out on a wide variety of timescales, depending mostly on how large they are. They'll leave remnants that grow slowly cooler. As a result, galaxies like ours will grow dimmer over time, unless they get seriously stirred up. That's what's going to happen to our galaxy. At just about the time our sun begins setting its sights on swallowing Earth, Any remaining inhabitants here will see the stars of the Andromeda Galaxy looming above the plane of our Milky Way. As shown in this simulation, the two are likely to tear each other apart, or at least severely jumble each other up. If it's a direct hit, all the stars in both galaxies will gradually join together in a gigantic galactic puffball known as an elliptical galaxy. All this turbulence of the merger could stimulate a wave of new stars being born, reinvigorating this new, larger galaxy. Dust-ups like this, where galactic neighbors come together, will be common as the epoch of stars grows toward its later stages. But a wholesale thinning out of the universe is inevitable on a grand scale.
Yeah, that's the most, they say, the most leading explanation of how the world came to be. And the world today, not only our Earth, the whole universe, you know, our Earth is just one part of these big other galaxies. Many other galaxies, and the world is one small part of it. So we are looking at galaxies of galaxies, you know, as the whole of creation. And the theory is that the whole universe began with one single atom or something that exploded, and from that one singular particle, everything grew out from that. And today, they say the whole universe today is about 13.8 billions of years. So a long time. If you put that in a timeline, it'll be something like this. So over there is the Big Bang right at the beginning, and that is that's 13.8 billion. Human beings, we've just come like yesterday. If you were to take, if the whole of creation, that 13.8 billions of years was 1 year, we would be just born about half an hour ago. Just to show where we have been in this whole creation. And this is the whole of creation that we are supposed to care for, you know. And so when we talk about God of the universe, it's the God that began with that Big Bang, and that this whole throughout this year, and this is the creation that we are called to care for. So once we were all together in form of energies and original particles in the primordial sphere, and then we were in giant red stars, and then the Milky Way, and then in the sun on the earth. We are all made from the same elements. As living beings, we have the same genetic code as other living things like insects, dinosaurs, sharks, monkeys. You know, we share a common origin. A core of brotherliness, sisterliness is objectively ties us together in a link that St. Francis called in a mystical way in the 13th century, that we are a great cosmic community. We have a common origin, certainly a single common destiny. So the universe, what marks the universe in its perfection in the creation of God is harmonious, interconnected, interrelated system. Any imbalance in that system, you know, will have repercussions on that web of life, as some people call. For living beings, the balance in the Earth system is crucial. For example, oxygen is necessary for life. The oxygen level in the atmosphere on which we living beings live has now remained unchanged for millions and millions of years at around 21% oxygen. So should it rise to 23%, there would be fires on this earth. and ravaging the green layer of the Earth's crust. So imagine global warming, the impact that it will have on the world if the oxygen level rises. The level of salt in the ocean is around 3.4%. Should it rise to 6%, life in the ocean and lakes would become impossible. It will be like the Dead Sea. Nothing will live in our ocean. If we allow the acid level and the salt to increase, which is happening now with increased CO2 in the air. Most of that will go into the ocean and increase the acid level in the ocean. So God created this whole universe into a harmonious, interconnected, interrelatedness system, so that everything is in a balance. And Pope Francis in Laudato Si, this light is not good for my eyes, states that everything is interconnected. Human life is grounded on these three relationships, as we talked about earlier on: God, with others, and with the earth. Our cultural framework of the earth, like in Fiji and different versions along on this, in the other islands, we have the Vanua, the Fonua, the Hanua, the Whenua, but we share the same cosmology and framework about seeing the world. And it refers to the world as a network of relationship between all kinds of creatures, people, land, and everything that lives on the land. The Whenua, the Maori version, relationship with God, with creation, and with the genealogy, with the past and the future. The Pope says that the universe defines the universe as a web of relationships and interconnectedness. So, what is happening today? Come down to the question, or the problem question, if you want to call it, the ecological crisis question. One of the sources that Pope Francis draws heavily on, while it is not acknowledged, is the book of Leonardo Boff, Franciscan priest whose theology was a bit too much for the Vatican. They took his license and stopped him from teaching in the Catholic University anymore. But he wanted to speak the truth, so he left the priesthood so that he can continue and not bound by the institutional church. But Pope knew that this guy has got a lot of insight about ecology. So the Pope called Leonardo Boff to send him his book, which is called The Cry of the Earth and Cry of the Poor. Okay, good. And thank you for that, where it is, thank you. And so the Pope tells Pope Boff, send your book, don't send it into the Vatican mail, because once the people in the Vatican see your name, your book is going to be thrown out of the window. So his book went through the back door, so that it went to Pope Francis. So Boff, and then Pope Francis will also say the same argument, that the thread that once connected all things, shaping unity of meaning and life in the universe, has been lost. Our interconnectedness, as Pope Francis will also say, is lost. This is the big question. Once we were interconnected from the Big Bang. Everything hung in a balance until we came into it yesterday, and we created a lot of havoc and disarray in the world today. There's a story that I found this actually in a toilet. Forgive the language and the thing that comes from the story. When God made man, all the parts of the body argued over who would be the boss. The brain explained that since he controlled all the parts of the body, he should be the boss. The legs argued since they took men and women wherever they wanted to go, they should be the boss. The stomach countered with the explanation that since he digested all the foods, he should be the boss. The eyes said that without them, human beings will be helpless. So, so the eyes said, I should be the boss. Then, forgive the language, but I'll say it in another language, in Tunlo language, Ratu Iwodo applied for that boss job. And he said, all the rest of the parts, he also applied for this job, a boss job. He said, and then all the parts, when they heard Ratu Iwodo speak, all the parts of the body looked to, you don't know anything. You are not important. All you do is give some kind of guess that's not good for everybody. You can't be in charge. The other parts of the body laughed so hard that Ratu Iwodo became mad and closed up. After a few days, the brain went foggy, the legs got wibbly, the stomach got ill, the eyes got blurred or something, unable to see. They all considered and made Ratu Iwodo the boss. They all agreed that they couldn't take it anymore of this and agreed to put him in charge. As you know, the moral of the story, well, according to the writer of this story, you don't have to be the most important to be in charge, just to be an asshole. Okay, forgive the language, I said. So just as the cell is part of the organs, each organ is part of the body. So each living being is part of the ecosystem. We don't make this ecosystem. We are only part of it. Each ecosystem is part of the overall earth and the overall universe. So this is the crisis in today's civilization. That the will to dominate everything is bringing us under domination. We thought we could dominate, exploit everything, but this civilization is what's bringing us under oppression and being dominated by ourselves and holding us in subjection to the imperatives of a degraded earth. The utopia, the vision of improving human condition has worsened the quality of life. The dream of unlimited growth has brought about underdevelopment of 2/3 of the world. Today the world, as they say, is in an advanced state of exhaustion because of this development paradigm. So the question for us, is it possible to maintain this logic of accumulating wealth, unlimited development, and yet avoid the breakdown in the ecological system and the loss of the lives of many species in the world, and also the species and the world that the future generation have a right to? Daniel Grudy's book on social justice, something is one of his books. He uses the analogy of a ship, like a cruise ship. It says, if the world was a ship, we would be, he calls this the wayward ship. If we are traveling together through the cosmos in a common ship, the ship would look like this. A few passengers would be in the upper class, enjoying the beauty of everything up there. And the vast majority of the Earth's inhabitants, we and other living things, we would be slaving along in the steam room down below as this vessel moves on. The engine of this ship is the economy, this kind of development that we're talking about. Technology is the fuel that's driving this ship. Communication, today's communication is steering this ship. It is not clear, however, who is the captain. We don't even know, the airplane we go, this is Captain so-and-so, and my co-pilot is this. We are no captain. Also we don't know what map the captain is using, or where we are going as a human community. And so while we cling to this vague hope for a better world, somewhere in the horizon, we also recognize that we could be shipwrecked on an iceberg or some reef because of human greed if we stay on this same course and not change course. So the whole patrimony of the earth and the well-being of the human race depend on how we steer our way through these uncharted waters. The same thing Boff states in his book. He says the world suffers from two critical wounds: the cry of the poor and the cry of the earth. The cry of the poor, 79% of humankind are poor. 1 billion live in state of absolute poverty. 3 billion out of 5.3 billion of the world's population do not have enough food to eat. 60 million die of hunger each year. 14 million young people under 15 die each year as a result of hunger-caused diseases. The sad thing is most of the well-off countries do not even devote 0.7 of their gross national product to the poverty. Even the US, the most richest country, they give only 0.15%. The cry of creation between 1,500 and between 1500 and 1850, one species may have been wiped out every 10 years. But between 1850 and 1950, one species every year is wiped out. 1990, one species, that means one cockroach, one something, disappearing every year. And by 2000, now that we're living, it will be one species wiped out per hour. That just goes to show how we are wiping out a lot of creation. We are becoming a death machine here in this world. Our earth is headed for crisis because of the loss of interconnectedness. We think that we are the boss. And the dominant narrative so far is development. Everything must revolve on this idea of progress, development. One famous quote that is quoted many times in environmental issues is the quote of Chief Seattle. Chief Seattle supposed to write this letter to the American government in the 1800s. And in this letter, he gave the most profound understanding of God in all things. And here is this letter, part of this letter. He says to the government, U.S. government, will you teach your children about what we have taught our children? That the earth is our mother. What befalls the earth befalls the sons of the earth. This we know. The earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. All things are connected, like the blood that unites us all. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand, a voi in that big mat. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. One thing we know, our God is also your God. The earth is precious to him, and to harm the earth is to heap contempt on the Creator. And so this is the crisis of our civilization. So how do we reweave this met, this ecological met? How do we repair the interconnectedness of the met, the ecological met of the universe? And this is where the argument of this lecture, which I'll try and squeeze in the next 10, 15 years, and again, inspired by the insights of some theologians, that we need language that change hearts, and that's the symbolic, the artistic. Johann Baptist Metz, one of the pioneers of liberation theology, he says that he speaks about narrative theology, the capacity to move people, story, Jesus' dangerous stories. Roger Haidt talks about the use of symbolic language in theology because that is all we have. We can only speak in terms of an analogy, symbols that are close to us. In fact, the whole of theology is that. We try to express something that we do not see, but the only way we can do that is the use of symbolic language. Donald Dorr, a Catholic theologian who works for the Pontifical Mission, he says, the weakness in Catholic social teaching is that it lacks the input of this indigenous language. And one of the prominent spiritual writers today in contemplation and mysticism, Father Richard Rohr, another Franciscan priest, also speaks of this. He says that he says this regarding the need for symbolic and the mystical language. He says, I suggest that we should be searching primarily in the universal and the wise depths of recurring symbols, metaphors, sacred stories, which is where human beings can find deep and lasting meaning or personal truth. So he says, true symbols are the thing in itself, and this is the whole thing about sacramental theology, that a symbol captures what it signifies, as opposed to a symbol, a sign. Our minds, through symbols, throw together meanings, largely without realizing we are even doing it. Poets, artists, storytellers have always been doing this. And now scientists are honest enough to realize that they too need metaphors to point to reality. Without new symbols, which are sometimes also words, unconscious meanings never break through to the conscience, and the invisible has no way of becoming invisible. So the whole argument of the limitation of the scientific language, and so far, at least for Fiji, all the things that you are hearing now, and also to the talks that I've been to about climate, and it's all about scientific. What's lacking is symbolic language, how it moves the hearts of people. And so this is what really the argument that I want to make tonight. But it's Leonard Boff and these other theologians have already been saying this. Theologians know this language. The church knows this language. And so Pope Francis says, just make another point that Richard Rohr says, symbols allows us to reframe, reweave, reorganize, reset the core meanings of our lives again and again. Many have called our postmodern world a crisis of meaning, a world where things do not mean anything. Humans cannot live happily without meaning, and that is what religion is about. Symbols have the power to give meaning, the meanings we wake up for each morning. Religion, that is probably our contribution as churches, as religions to the whole discussion on climate change. Religion, Richard Rohr says, knew the truth of the metaphor and the symbol for almost all of history until the past few hundred years with the Enlightenment period. Then it moved to reason and moving away from the power of the symbol. And now this crisis is reminding us that we need to go back to this symbolic reality. So what does a new vision for the world, for saving our universe call for? It calls for a radical, fundamental change in people's minds and patterns of relationship with the whole universe. A new language, new imagination, new politics, new pedagogy, new ethics, new discovery of the sacred, and a new process of spirituality. New directives for change and healing the earth. A paradigm, a vision that will recover, reweave our interconnectedness. Even in the Catholic tradition, we have only recently moved from just the common good, what is good for the human being. Now we are realizing that it's not only the good of the human being, but the good of the whole planet. There's an interesting dissertation that I came across while trying to find a language for the water in Natarandave. And I came across this thesis of a woman called Rachel Noel Hart. And her thesis was Just Water, a feminist Catholic response to the commodification of water. She wrote this dissertation in 2014. Now, Laudato Si came in 2015. So the Pope is not the first to talk about this. Some women and some other people have awakened to the shift just from the connectedness of human being to the whole planet, but the whole universe connectedness. So a new vision for caring for the world must hold together this interconnectedness. Now, where do we look to for this? We can't look to the West, because they are actually the ones that has broken our interconnectedness with the developments that exploit nature and human beings. We cannot move there. Laudato Si uses this kind of language, uses our common home. The Pope could have used planet Earth, but he used a very image that is at home to all people. A home. We want a good home. Our investment is about leaving behind a better home to our children and our grandchildren, that they would not have to live and go through the struggle that we go through. We want to leave behind a better home. So it's a very powerful image. Mother, sister, feminine. Boff says that women know what interconnected is better than men. Some people laugh. There's a lot of men in this room. They say that women know what interconnectedness because of childbirth. For 9 months, another life depended on them. For many years, for the first 9 years, this baby depended on his mother. They know what connectedness means. They know the pain that is the cost or the price to pay for giving new connectedness, the pangs of childbirth. We were at a meeting one day and some men were complaining about pain. One woman said, you men don't know what pain is, man. You haven't given birth to a child to experience what pain is. What pain are you talking about? Yeah. So where do we look to? And this is the argument that I want to close with. We look to our indigenous symbols and culture. So the report of sustainable development called the Pacific Island Perspective in 2008 states this: Pacific cultural societal values and governance systems reinforce the ideals of sustainability through measures such as taboos, totems, closed season for marine resources, and even measures such as the restriction of marriage to firstborn children and the encouragement of infanticide through prolonged droughts and other natural disasters, as practiced in the islands of Tikopia in the Solomon Islands. Traditional indigenous knowledge, the report continues, approaches to sustainability were embodied into systems of knowledge and practice applicable to all sectors of livelihood, such as controlled access and use of natural resources, food security, and so forth. All these bodies of knowledge and practices have assisted Pacific communities to sustain themselves effectively throughout history without complex technological intervention. See, our forefathers knew how to look after the earth without technology. You know, and the people in the Namois don't need mining to be well off. They are already, with and without, I told the people, with or without mining, you will remain people of Namois. What happens is most of this mining and this money goes overseas. Actually, I told them, I had a meeting with the Namois joint venture. I asked them, how much of your profit goes to the people of the land? They did not answer that question, but they said, 95% goes to the company, 5% goes to the government. They didn't tell me how much went to the landowners. So I told the Namois people, you know, you don't need this mine to survive. Most of the proceeds actually won't stay with you. It'll go to somebody else. A few people offshore, somewhere overseas, will get the benefits of this thing. So our people can survive without modern technology. Oceania has a substantial contribution to the, because of that, we have a very substantial contribution to the conversation of climate change through indigenous paradigms. I want to close with just a few references, time is up, on the Fijian context. Some of the framework for talking or empowering people through indigenous Fijian framework. So first one is the Vanwall Framework, or the Vanwall cosmology. The Vanwall has a social, spiritual, political dimension. So like other places, Whenua, Fonua, Hanua, it's the sum total of one's relationship to the people, land, creation, to the dead, and the world of the spirits. The Vanwall is the whole network of relationships of an indigenous, for the Itoke people. At the heart of this relationship is the chiefly system. The Turanga, or the chief, is the central symbol linking all other relationships and symbols of the Vanwall. He embodies and represents the Vanwall. All identity, roles, status are defined in terms of their relationship to the Vanwall. And in the installation of a chief, this is really well played out. So the installation of the chief is really the chief drinking his first bowl of Yangona. And in that symbol, the chief is saying, I accept the responsibility of protecting the Vanwall, the people, the land, the living things that's on the land, under the land, in the ocean, and in the atmosphere. When I drink this first bowl, I commit myself to this task to protect the Vanwall. I gave these same words in a conference on Catholic social teaching about last month. Some of our prominent chiefs were there. Tui Rakau, Tui Rokutunriketi, Tui Wainunu, and you know, you can see that language drives home a very important, it's a very easy way of bringing home the message. But you know, today chiefs are in this crossroad. As the souls to Jesus says, are you in the crossroad? We are at a crossroad in our culture system, you know. The crossroad is like this. The chief is here in government. Over here is the company. Over here is the people. Where do you align yourself? To the government and the corporations, or to the people that you say you take on when you drink your first bowl of Yangona? This is the dilemma, or this is the crossroad that some of our traditional chiefs, and we need to challenge them, and also our government. Another concept, beautiful concept, one of the finest in the Fijian culture is the Solivaki, people coming together to work in your plantation, to clean a new field or plant The idea that no one is left behind poor. I remember as a little kid, that was the system that was going around in areas in Etobi. Everybody take turns in farming. Also, it's been transferred to fundraising. The student goes to school, high school. At those times, there was the school fees was high, and we also applied the concept of social right. Burying a child's umbilical cord. Professor Upol mentioned the umbilical cord, and I was happy that he mentioned that. There's a tradition in Fijian culture and many other cultures, I've just found out, regarding the umbilical cord, that you bury it. Something has to be done with the umbilical cord, because the umbilical cord was the thing that connected you to your mother. You know, and when you were born, and as the gospel says, unless a seed dies, unless you cut that umbilical cord, new life cannot begin. But there's a tradition in many cultures that you bury that umbilical cord with a fruit plant, coconut, something else. And if a kid is seen to be running around too much, too hyper, we always say, oh, that kid's umbilical cord was probably not buried and it's not grounded. So again, the connection with the earth and the connectedness that our minds, our values, or our practices have with Mother Earth. Now he's disconnected from his mother. We have to reconnect him to Mother Earth, to ground him. So when a kid is too playful, too hyperactive, the older people will say, I think you never buried, you forgot to bury his umbilical cord. The next one is the death tambu. When somebody dies, normally there's a tambu on the fishing grounds for 100 nights. And then after the 100th night, then people go out and fish, and there's a feast. So that gives time for fish to grow, people to let the fishing ground lie fallow, or I don't know what's the right word to use. We use that on the land, but just to give time for the ocean to recuperate. And then, so one of the, I was doing searching around for these things last week. Sad now because we don't have access to the people who actually created these practices, and to ask them, why did you do that? What's recorded now is only what we do, but not the philosophy and the mind. Why did you do that? Why this? We don't have access to that, but definitely we can see richness in that. And then the whole area of totems, again, connected to nature, connected to the universe. There are things sacred in nature. So, as I said, don't mention, be very careful to name plants, animals. You must look around first before you, in Fijian culture, we do that. Or sometimes you go and buy fish in the store, you first have to look around. That nobody that is related to you, whose sacred food is the fish, is not around. And sometimes they say the fish, when you buy the fish, you go home, the fish is decayed or it's gone bad. Because you're not supposed to take that in the presence of your batiki, your batiki. Semiser Wakula, one of the retired teachers, tells this story. In Nasautoka is a village up in Wanimbuka. Their sacred plant is the vunga. And in the other villages around that place, some of the chiefs, the lower chiefs in that place, they cut the vunga and used to build their house. Some of the Nasautoka women married to that village, and they saw, hey, these people have cut down our mother, the vunga, to build. That's a big insult. So they went to the village chief and placed a summon, traditional summon. They say, you will be penalized because you have desacralized our sacred tree, the vunga. So there was a traditional Vilewai court judgment on this man because they cut down the vunga. And they were summoned to Nasautoka for the judgment. At the judgment, they were given their penalty. Their penalty was they should prepare 20 tambua. That's big money now. 5 cows and 150 mats for their penalty. And they were given 5 months to prepare this. And the instruction for them how to bring this to Nassau Toka is that the cows are to be brought by land, and the rest of the people are to come down by Mbilimbili, by the raft, bamboo raft, to present their thing. That's a little bit long ago, but just a few years ago when I was in Lotoka, we, the Catholic Women's Meeting, and we killed some pigs for the songo, for the event, for the food. Now the pig is a sacred animal for the people in Korlebu. And we took the pig and hung it on the fireplace. When the people from Korlebu came, and they said, "He's so nene." Nene is mom in the language. They say, "What have you done to our mother?" So they brought all the the mats and wrapped this dead pig, and then took it down, and then they took it to the classroom that they were in. We realized we had done something wrong, that we were in that parish. So we went to apologize to them. A few weeks later, we collected a lot of gifts, mats, food, everything. 2 buses. We went to Korlevu to go and make our apology and to what. Okay, that's one thing, what you see on the surface, but beneath this, there's something else. It's the strengthening of relationships, blood ties, for those chiefs in Nassau Toka, loyalty to the chiefs. And so people on the outside don't see this, but sometimes we don't even see that the Fijians people, we are beginning to say, there's too many things to do, but we don't see the value that these things bring. Interconnectedness, relationships that the world is that the world is losing and is searching for. Something that we have, interconnectedness. So the challenge for us as church leaders is how we bring this into theology, how we bring this to our schools to teach and keep our traditional values, which has something that the world is crying out for. Thank you very much.